Ancient Egypt. 90% of Egypt is useless. Sun-scorched desert. Step left, you're sunbathing. Step right, you're a mummy. Life shouldn't exist there. They had one lifeline, the Nile. But the Nile was like a moody teenager. Sometimes it flooded your house. Sometimes it left you bone dry for a decade. Most civilizations would have left. The Egyptians looked at each other and said, "We're staying." Their hack? Basin irrigation, a network of walls and canals that turned the entire country into a giant, programmable ice cube tray. Capture the flood, lock it, grow food, repeat. It created so much surplus that millions of workers suddenly had nothing to do. So they built the Great Pyramid, 2.3 million blocks, each heavier than an African elephant, stacked so precisely you can't fit a credit card between them. No iron tools, no pulleys, just math and a river they turned into a servant. Those workers, by the way, weren't slaves. They had contracts, salaries, and daily rations of beef, fish, and beer. In 2500 BC, the pharaohs didn't just rule a desert, they owned the water cycle. Sumerians. The Sumerians had zero natural resources. No stone, no timber, just endless mud. So they did the most human thing ever. They turned mud into bricks and built the world's first cities. But then they hit a rich people problem. They were so good at farming that nobody could remember who owned what. Business was booming, accounting was a disaster. Civilization was about to collapse into a fistfight over a bag of wheat. Their hack? Writing. Not for poetry, for receipts. They invented cuneiform, pressing wedges into wet clay to track debts. Owes 10 jars of beer to Zur, history's first database. Because they could track resources, they built Uruk, 50,000 people, while the rest of the world was still struggling to set up a tent. London wouldn't reach that number for another 4,000 years. They also invented the wheel, the 60-minute hour, and the first legal code. A surgeon could be legally punished for a failed operation. In 1750 BC, some things never change. A muddy stick is way deadlier than a sword, as long as you use it to write a receipt. The Maya. Most smart civilizations build near rivers. The Maya chose the rainforest, nutrient-poor soil, humidity that rots everything, plants that try to swallow your house every night. A terrible place for an empire. They built one anyway. The Milpa system and Chultans. Massive underground cisterns carved into limestone to store millions of gallons for the dry season. They weren't just farmers. They were chemists, using controlled burns to fertilize soil with ash. While Europe was in the Dark Ages, the Maya invented the concept of zero. Without zero, no algebra, no calculus, no computers. They had it in 350 AD. Most of Europe was still missing a number. They calculated the solar year to within 0.0002 days of the actual figure. No telescopes. In a jungle, they built pyramids that functioned as solar calendars and managed a city of 100,000 people, all without metal tools or the wheel. They didn't just survive the jungle, they outsmarted it so hard their ruins are still standing 1,000 years later. If nature gives you a green hell, you build a galaxy of stone. Khmer Empire. Angkor. Nearly 1 million people at its peak. The largest city on Earth in the 12th century, making London look like a quiet village. Monsoon was a problem. 6 months of catastrophic flooding. 6 months of brutal drought, a climate designed to make agriculture impossible. So they engineered their way out. They built barrays, artificial lakes so massive, one stretches over 8 kilometers, still visible from satellite today. They redirected rivers to run through their temples as natural cooling systems while keeping rice fields flooded year-round. A 400 square kilometer circuit board of canals and reservoirs. They didn't just live with the water, they programmed it. And then the same system began to fail. Deforestation disrupted the flow. Small cracks became irreversible. The empire that took centuries to build collapsed in less than 100 years, not from invasion, not from disease, but from engineering failure. The Incas. No flatland, air too thin to breathe, no wheel, no horses, no written language. The Inca looked at a vertical cliff in the Andes and said, "That looks like a great spot for a garden." Their hack was terrace farming, carving mountains into giant green staircases. Each level held a different temperature, allowing them to grow over 4,000 varieties of potatoes and corn at altitudes where plants usually die. Thermal batteries disguised as farmland. To connect it all, they built 40,000 kilometers of road through solid rock and canyon rope bridges. Relay runners called chasqui covered 400 kilometers per day. The Inca transmitted messages faster than Napoleon could, 2,000 years later, with horses. They also invented freeze drying. Mountain cold plus dry air equals food preserved for 4 years. No refrigerator, no chemistry, just altitude. They turned the sky into their backyard and the mountains into their pantry. Vikings. Scandinavia's breathtaking, but you can't eat a view. Frozen soil. A growing season 5 minutes long. Mountains blocking every exit. Most civilizations would have accepted that. The Vikings built a boat, not just any boat, the longship, light enough to carry overland, tough enough to survive North Atlantic storms that would sink a Roman galley, flat bottom for rivers, deep enough for oceans. Same boat, different continent. They navigated in total fog using sunstones, crystals that reveal the sun through clouds. No compass, no GPS, just a rock and the sky. They reached North America in 1000 AD, 492 years before Columbus, fueled by dried fish and pure audacity. Called it Vinland, built settlements, and left. History barely noticed. Viking women owned property, filed for divorce, and led expeditions, while the rest of Europe was burning books. They weren't barbarians who got lucky. When the frozen land is a wall, the sea becomes your only door, and they kicked it wide open.